I'm your cult boyfriend. Today I'll be talking about the third season of Gossip Girl, a show that I am absolutely in love with right now. And the third season, another masterpiece. I loved it. And it's kind of surprising. I was told that in the third season is where the show starts to really dip in quality. It's where it starts to take a nosedive. But it couldn't be more incorrect. I can see why they would think that. We might get into those reasons later, but it's just sleight of hand. Gossip Girl is still in complete control, and Gossip Girl is still entirely masterful. And in this video, I'll probably just be discussing the things I found most interesting about the season, because there's a lot of different moving parts in this season. Far too many for me to cover in one video. And I really just want to devote my time to what I found to be the most interesting. We are starved for narrative in our lives. We're starved for plot lines, for story structure, for character development, for drive and character motivation. We seek out narratives. Life does not organically have like a narrative system to it. We seek them out. We like to look back at our lives episodically as if they're stories. Scheming, plotting, that's exactly what we all do, quite hyper literally, plotting our lives. Narratives don't just happen, and when they do, it's normally because it's forced upon you by an outside variable. Life is role play. It's pretty cool because when we come back to this season, uh we get the rug pulled out from under us a few times by Chuck and Blair, who their kink is narrative. Their kink is plotting. Their kink is narrative. Chuck as the cheating husband and Blair as the scorned woman. Chuck and Blair's kink is narrative. It's great public theater. Serena, on the other hand, wants to game the meta-narrative itself, to find who she really is outside of the grand design. Is there existence outside of the grand design of narrative? And she thinks that finding her father will help her discover this. Of course, throughout the season, when her father does come back and is just a better manipulator and con man, it kind of destroys a part of her that thought there was existence outside of this grand narrative. Chuck even says in the final episode, I think the most revealing lines of the entire season, with he's speaking to Jenny, trying to console her in a morbid way, but he's still trying to help her. He says, but the world that you're looking for only exists from the outside. I only survive because I know that it's empty. Chuck, a young man haunted by the ghost of his father, betrayed by every member of his family that's still alive, except for his found ones, right? Except for Lily and Blair to a certain extent. But it is really fascinating how Serena tries to game the meta-narrative by manipulating the paparazzi. Because paparazzi are meta-narrative, and she's trying to get her father's attention in the beginning of the season by acting a fool with Carter Basin. She figures out how to game the meta-narrative itself. So the dynamic I found most fascinating this season, I think that every character did some pretty interesting things. But the most interesting characters, MVPs of this season, are Chuck, and very surprisingly, Jenny Humphrey. I thought Blair was great. Okay, I thought Blair was excellent. But she didn't quite steal the show this time. Because the secret weapon were its two most nihilistic and self-destructive qualities, and those are found embodied, hyper-personified by Chuck Bass and Jenny Humphrey. Jenny is an incredibly fascinating character. I get the idea from Jenny that in a large way she was supposed to be the chosen one. You know, like she was supposed to be that thing, that girl, that person that defied the narrative or at least made the narrative genuine or sincere. But no, what Jenny ultimately came to symbolize, much to the dismay of the schemers and plotters and manipulators around her, she came to symbolize how the meta narrative, how the incredibly artificial and superficial and self-obsessed world that is in Gossip Girl, how that corrupts young girls with very real, tangible dreams. I didn't mention Willa Holland in my last video analysis, but she plays like a foil to Jenny Humphrey. She is a model who befriends Jenny and manipulates her and abuses her. And she reappears in this season to drug her and try to get her basically gang raped at like a bachelor party. She like leaves her there with all these models. Willa Holland is great. You know, I just forgot to mention her. Super sexy. Oh my God, dude. Remember her from the OC, which makes sense because obviously the showrunners here are Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz. They both come from the OC. Josh Schwartz, in particular, created the OC, but Stephanie Savage, I've been doing a lot more research into Gossip Girl, and Stephanie Savage, I think, it's at least 50-50 between Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, if not Stephanie Savage having a little bit more input, a little bit more control over Gossip Girl. And she worked on the OC pretty intimately as well. It's just when you go and read, if you go look for insight for interviews about about the philosophical or like aesthetic frameworks of the show, you'll mostly find information coming directly from Stephanie Savage. Now, that's not a huge indicator of who's really making all these decisions. I like to think it's a joint process. I like to think it's a true partnership. But just judging from the output, she's at least the most vocal about the direction of the show, at least in the third season. So the architect of the third season, I'm pretty comfortable saying is mostly Stephanie Savage because we can start to see some deviations from the first two seasons. But I don't want to leave Jenny Humphrey quite yet. Jenny Humphrey is that girl who wanted desperately to be a fashion designer. The little girl from Brooklyn that could, the little girl who ingratiated herself into the highest echelons, into the upper crust of Manhattan's Upper East Side elite. She did it. It ate her up from the inside. It destroyed her. It corroded her. It gutted her. It took the soul of Jenny that we came to know and love as this sincere and naive but kind of daring thing, this presence throughout the show. And in season three, punishment, 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 until she's deflowered by Chuck in the final episode of this season. And Chuck, of course, you can't have some sort of romantic scene with the two of them together without being reminded of the pilot episode of the entire show where Chuck tries to rape her. And it takes her three entire seasons to give herself to that punishment, to the punishment of the elite. Now, I know that it's not framed as menacingly as that, but you have to remember the way that the meta narrative operates. And that's what we learned through Jenny Humphrey. Jenny Humphrey could manipulate the narrative just as well as anybody else could. But she was an easier target, an easy punching bag, and she was on a self destructive tailspin, a spiral. And it was heartbreaking seeing what happens to Jenny throughout the course of these three seasons. I didn't exactly realize where they were going because they didn't make it too obvious, but she is the secret weapon of this season because she ends up dating a drug dealer. And some of the drugs that she provides for him to sell together, she takes them from Lily. She thinks the pills are oxycodone, but truly they are ivermectin. And they are being prescribed wrongfully. Basically, William, um, Serena's Serena's long lost father, and I mean Lily's estranged spouse, has been fooling Lily into believing that she was sick. And it's this huge plot, it's this huge master grand scheme. And Jenny is the smoking gun because Jenny has the pills. And a girl gets mad at Jenny saying, like, yeah, you gave me a bunch of antibiotics and it made me sick as fuck. They weren't oxy. So she puts two and two together and she calls the one person that she can trust that she hasn't completely betrayed yet, and that is Chuck. And I like the Chuck and Jenny partnership at first, right? Well, it's a partnership to the very end because they are both on self destructive spirals. It's just that Jenny's is more tragic because she's so young and it's so avoidable. With Chuck, it's like you signed your you signed your pact with the devil years ago. You somehow deserve every bad thing that could ever happen to you. That's the tragedy of Chuck. But I like seeing them work together to try and uncover Will's Will Vanderwoodson's grand scheme. It's so funny because Serena was trying to find her father, to try to find some sincerity or authenticity, something genuine in this world that seems to be defined by paparazzi, by media, by created narratives, real or unreal. And she tries to find that through her father, and her father is the architect of this grand scheme, this grand design that is so cold, so well thought out that it takes every single hero of Gossip Girl to uncover it. And I love when they kind of work together to figure it out, like they're like a gang of Scoobies or something, and they all come together and figure it out. And it takes exactly 2 scenes for one of them to like start to betray the other, which just so happens to be Jenny by trying to give Will a heads up, like get out of here because I want my family back. Because that's also the tragic part, because Jenny wants to go back to Brooklyn by the end. She sees the artifice for what it is. She sees the narrative for what it is. And if this is what high stakes living is, when there's good guys and there's bad guys, like an old silent movie screams in a vacuum, she'd rather go back to being unseen, unheard, uncared for, unloved. She'd rather do that. But the meta narrative, but Gossip Girl has other plans for Jenny Humphrey. Chuck is supposed to be waiting up there in the Empire State Building for Blair to come there and like prove that she loves him, because he's like, if you're a minute late, I will close my heart to you forever. And before we go to Chuck's greatest sin, ultimately, Chuck went through so much this season. And I loved seeing Chuck and Blair together. It was perfect. It was these two people who are completely aware of the narratives that they create. In fact, it's a kink for them. It's how they survive. It's how they continue to survive. They are the directors, the playwrights of the public theater that is for East Side existence. And they're perfect together, and they have so much fun. Of course, they fall apart by the end of the season, but not before Chuck is brutally betrayed by his mother and by his uncle, um, in a way that would make the Greek tragedians blush. Like, Chuck went through an awful lot. And by the end, Chuck thinks that Blair has completely turned her back on him. So he tries to regress into the old archetype that he was and finishes what he started in the pilot. And Jenny is at such a self-destructive point because she's so in love with Nate. No one loves her. No one loves her. She's the most unloved, the loneliest living girl in New York. They both regress. Chuck regresses to his point in the pilot, and Jenny becomes so numb to the narrative, to trying to fit in within it, and to trying to change it, to change its course. She surrenders to it and just becomes this numb pawn within a grander scheme. That's all we ultimately are. It's a deeply nihilistic ending here because Chuck and Jenny sleep together, and that, of course, is Jenny's first time having sex. It's the ultimate corruption. Now, Chuck's not trying to be villainous, uh, like in this act. In fact, I think he's like pretty understandable, but he still does it. It's still the ultimate sign of defeat. I think Jenny's been defeated by the narrative, by Gossip Girl, by the grand design of the Upper East Side. She's been defeated by it, and Chuck was basically deflowering the corpse of something that was once pure but is now so unrecognizable that it's tortured and hopeless. It was a really nihilistic season, which is interesting because there are so many fun moments. It's mostly fun, right? Because I think that that's where people have problems. Are like, Gossip Girl starts to take a nosedive. No, it doesn't. I think it starts to take a nosedive if you never watched the OC. But if you watch the OC, if you studied the OC, like I have, and like I know a few of you who watch my channel do, because I covered it on here, um, this kind of heightened realism was always here. This kind of crazy comedy, it's definitely the kind of show where Hilary Duff could You could have like a 6 episode arc on the show for really no apparent reason. Well, there's a philosophical reason. You have to relay everything back to the narrative and to the idea that all of our lives are made up by narratives and that our lives, that's what memories are. They are how we remember plot lines and episodes. We remember our lives episodically. Our lives are soap operas, right? And we seek out the narratives, the storylines that we want to pursue, the ones that are thrust upon us. Those are the dark episodes, right? Because those are someone else's narratives that we have to work through. Those are how we find our antagonists. And we all have antagonists. We all have main character syndrome. And even if you don't, you know you're a supporting player in someone else's more impressive story. Life is nihilistic, and Gossip Girl knows this. But Gossip Girl also knows that life is really fucking funny and can be really sexy and cool and it can be just as innocent as it is craved. Like it can be everything all at once. That's the fun of narratives because there's no objective truth. Truth, truth is not a list of facts. Truth is gossip. Gossip is truth. Gossip is fun. Of course, we start this season with my eternal crush, Georgina Sparks, showing up and just being a complete fucking postmodern wrecking ball. And every chance that she gets, um, Dan, you're a lucky fuck. What are you talking? The most interesting things Dan did this season involved Georgina Sparks. If I could say anything, it's I think Dan isn't it's completely necessary. Dan and Vanessa to me are like pretty boring. I think they're supposed to be boring though to show the average lives, but when it's juxtaposed or contrasted with like something that Blair and Chuck are doing or Serena and Nate are up to or even Rufus and Lily, they definitely Jenny. Jenny is entirely like all encompassing. She's amazing this season. But Dan and Vanessa, they're so boring. They are so boring together. I really liked Dan when he was fucking around with Georgina because it gave Georgina license to be the postmodern wrecking ball that she was designed to be. And when I say postmodern wrecking ball, I mean these unknown variables that enter into a situation to cause trouble, to tear everything down, to look at all the careful narratives that were created by all the different characters, all of their hopes and dreams and wants and desires, and she crushes them, or she inverts them, or she like redirects them, right? Because she gets to drop the huge bomb that Scott is Lily and Rufus's love child and walk off the show, like leave. That is the ultimate postmodern wrecking ball move. Or it's coming back in the final minutes of the season to go, Dan, he looks just like you. Here's my fucking baby. Here's your baby. It's like that's a postmodern wrecking ball, all right? It's a character who every time you see her, you're like, oh, it's about to get interesting, and everyone's gonna hate it, but I'm gonna love it. Think Abby Morgan from Dawson's Creek or Rachel Gatina from One Tree Hill. There are plenty of postmodern wrecking balls out there, and Georgina Sparks is one of the very best ones. I actually did like seeing Hilary Duff on this show. She was fun. She was really fun. That made for Dan have an interesting storyline. Like I said, everything relates and relays, I guess, back to the idea, the theme of narratives and creating your own narratives. And of course, she is the celebrity who is trying to lead a more genuine existence, and I think just gets caught up within the like another intricate tangle of wires that are the roles and dynamics and role reversals of the Upper East Side of college of Blair and Dan and Vanessa. Um, but it was great seeing her. She's really fun to have around. It was cool. Fashion plays a really huge part on the show. Um, Fashion is really expressive, right? I noticed it most in this season because while Jenny is on this spiral, and I think it's true of all the other seasons. I just wasn't available to engage with this aspect of the show. But Jenny is constantly like her fashion. It's so important to most of the characters on the show, but her being a designer as well, I think that what she wears completely amplifies how she feels, what her character motivation is, what her narrative drives are, or narrative desires are, right? Because most of the time things do not work out for Jenny, but she is dressed like some Upper East Side punk rock debutante. She's dressed hopefully, but with a nihilistic harshness to her features. And I think that the fashion is excellent. I just started noticing it this time, especially with characters like Jenny and Chuck and Blair and Serena. That's where the fashion I think is at its most expressive and amplified, and those are probably the characters who care the most about what they're wearing. And fashion is certainly a way of vocalizing without speech, just amplifying how you feel and how you want the world around you to perceive you. And I think that Gossip Girl handles fashion in a masterful way, in a way that isn't distracting. Because as I said, I didn't really engage with it too much until the third season, and now these scenes have even more dimensions to them, have an even greater amount of aesthetic and philosophical texture to them. The texturing is incredible. I can now watch every scene and see it in multitudes. And one of those levels of watching the scene is through the fashion decisions, through what the characters are wearing, or even the garments that they are holding. And I think it's fabulous. I think that there should be a channel that just hyper analyzes um, the costume design on the show, because I think it's incredible to look at, and I think it's saying so much. So much. It's possible to get through certain storylines just by watching what the characters are wearing, because you'll see who has the upper hand, who is vulnerable, who is strong, who is lonely, and who is desperate, and who is truly targeted. Maybe who's the new queen. I thought season 3 was an extremely masterful season. I'm still deeply impressed by Gossip Girl. 3 seasons in, I can reiterate, I can repeat, I can reemphasize, baby. I can tell you again that, yeah, it's the best teen drama I've ever seen. I'm 3 seasons in, I've got 3 more to go, but if it keeps this up, wow. I mean, it's already in the top 3, you know? It's already in the top 3. I think it could take the number 1 spot. I think it could beat the likes of Dawson's Creek and One Tree Hill and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Veronica Mars and the OC, My So-Called Life, The Vampire Diaries. I think that Gossip Girl can beat all of them. It has it in it. Um, I think I don't know how to combat the criticisms to season 3 because I'm not too familiar with them. I like to do a lot of these reviews in a vacuum when it comes to the fandom. I don't like to know what the fandom thinks. I film these videos like really far in advance because I don't want to engage with the fandom. I don't want I want my reading of the show to be my own, to be mine, and not affected by what the general community thinks or what the broader community how the broader community feels about a certain season or episode or character. So but I do know that that people are start calling season 3, that's where they say it starts to get a bit crazy and messy. I don't agree. And if anything's getting messy, I think that's telling of the characters starting to lose grip of the narrative. See, that's the perfect thing about the framework established by Stephanie Savage and Josh Schwartz. Because even if the show gets messy, you can reasonably argue that it's because the characters themselves are getting messy when it comes to manipulation, when it comes to keeping control of their lives and the narrative and the meta narratives that are used to express their lives. Like, that's what makes the show so brilliant. Because there's 1,000 postmodern safeguards to keep it interesting and entertaining and perfectly. It's like the tone is perfect. I don't even see like even if there is like a bad season, you can reasonably argue that that's because the characters themselves were creating poor narratives. You know, like that it's such a brilliant show because it built in 1,000 postmodern safety nets to keep it from floundering. It's so good. Gossip Girl season 3, does it get like crazier or messier? No, I mean every season of Gossip Girl should understandably raise the stakes a bit. You know, I mean this season ends with Chuck getting shot in some Eastern European red light district. You know, but I have season 4 right here. Hey, look at him, alive. Also, look at her. I felt like she was actually leaving the show. I thought that she was finally escaping the narrative, but it looks like I'll have her in season 4, which I'm not complaining about because Yeah, Jenny and Chuck were the two best characters in season three. I just thought that her last episode in season three did feel like a bon voyage of sorts. So I'm kind of surprised that she is coming back. But yeah, Chuck's obviously still alive. But my main point was with Gossip Girl specifically, just like with the OC, right? You have to raise the stakes each season. Each season, you got to raise the stakes because that is the name of the game. That is teen drama. And Gossip Girl does it really, really well, and in my opinion, effortlessly. And you have to bite the bullet. If you see a shark, jump that motherfucker. I don't care. Jump it. Jump the shark, baby. Jump it over and over and over again. Because that's how our lives are made up. Think of how many times that you took a leap of faith. Think of how many times that you did something absurd and your life kind of changed. It didn't get messier. The characters' dynamics got more complicated. The messiness that you perceive is just the results of all the extra threads, of all the extra hurt heartstrings, right? Because now when the characters betray and scheme and hurt each other and stab each other in the back, it means more and more and more as the episodes progress and all of these complications and character dynamics pile on top of each other. It's not getting messier. It's getting more brutal. And I think that's my ultimate defense of season three. I don't think it's messier. I think it's more brutal. I also think it's more daring to be more comedic, more bombastic, and I applaud it for that. Because I don't want the show to ever feel stale, because that would betray Gossip Girl as a concept. And Gossip Girl never does feel stale, and they have to do quite a few daring and outrageous things to keep the show feeling fresh. And they do that a few times in season three, and every time I was more than happy to accommodate the show's goals, and I jumped every shark with them, and I'm really proud that I did. You know, I love Gossip Girl, but I think that's where I'm gonna end it. I'm so excited for season four. Thank you for watching my video. In the comments, what do you think of season three? Are you a fan of season three? I love season three. It's another masterpiece. Um, it's so good. It's so good. I really can't wait. So season four, huh? All right, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for watching my video. Like the video, by the way. Share it if you know any other Gossip Girl fans. Send them my way. I'd love to get to know more of you. Have a good one.